Hey, this is Notser, and today, this is the review for the Tier 9 Premium American Heavy Cruiser Alaska. It's finally in the game as of 8.1, and I'm going to talk to you about why you would want to ever spend 1 million free XP on this beautiful ship. The game in the background is myself in the Alaska, and we are on the map north, and I just wanted to try a different style of review. I know my typical style has a lot of stats on the screen, and then it goes into a game that's loosely connected. I want to try and just explain away the design of the Alaska and my thoughts on it and my impression over the last, gosh, it's been like 3, 4, 5 months of testing. And yet here we are, 8.1, final release, 1 million free XP. How does she play? Well, she's just a shrunken down Iowa, basically. She's got great speed, great maneuverability, very usable gun placement, 9 305mm guns on 3 gun turrets, 2 in the front, 1 in the rear. It has a minimum of 27mm of armor all the way around, except for the superstructure, so it is not vulnerable to 380 or 381mm guns like the Azuma. So much appreciated. And on top of that, one great aspect of the armor, the main belt, the main armor belt, and the main belt just above it, not the upper armor belt, but we've got the lower and the main. Both of them are on the outside of the ship. That is extra armor that will force high explosive to shatter on those sections. Unlike something like the Azuma, or even the Iowa, or, Alsace, which has an outer soft layer of armor, there's a significant amount of the ship where HE just will fail to penetrate. And that's a really nice advantage, considering the game design sort of entices you to have that. For the game itself, that's great. So, 9 305mm guns. The turrets have a traverse of 30 seconds to traverse 180 degrees. Very manageable. This is, above average for battleships, sort of below average for cruisers, right where I would expect the Alaska to be. The high explosive and the armor-piercing shells are wonderful. One of the advantages of the Americans is their super heavy AP shells, and that is definitely the case here. These AP shells do more damage on average for the gun caliber, and obviously you want to take advantage of that with broadside targets. Because it is a 305mm gun, it has a much, much easier time reliably citadeling enemy battleships who happen to make an over-angling mistake, or they're just broadside for whatever reason. That is wonderful. I really feel the power that the ship has. One aspect of the ship that you may or may not have seen in the 3, 4, 5, 6 months of testing was the AP shells against enemy DDs. Prior to the battleship AP nerf, this ship regularly averaged 10 and 12,000 damage against a close enemy DD, similar to what we just saw with that enemy at B point. That's not the case anymore. This was one of the ships that received a massive nerf with the battleship AP overpin adjustment. It was one of the gun calibers that got nerfed, and I want to be completely upfront with you. If you saw an Alaska game and they were regularly blapping DDs out of existence, well, that's not the case anymore. So I just want to make sure you're aware. This ship definitely got nerfed with the battleship AP adjustment, but it didn't take away its teeth. It still is very scary. High explosive armor piercing. It's wonderful. As far as equipment is concerned, it can equip everything that you would expect for any cruiser at this tier. You've got defensive AA or hydroacoustic. Slot 2 is radar or, aircraft. And then slot 3 is, of course, the heel. Now, you can customize your build to your heart's content between all those options. I personally prefer this build, but I understand others who don't. So we've got, of course, the 305. That's a great armament. It has good concealment, good hit points, pretty great AA, honestly. I've tested it with the CV rework because, since we've had it in testing for so long, obviously that's adjusted. but it definitely has really great, usable, consistently effective AA. It doesn't have good air detectability, at least when compared to a standard cruiser. So don't try and ambush enemy aircraft. You're going to have to only be able to do that behind islands or around stuff or whatever. Overall, the Alaska is a real treat to play. Consistent guns, outstanding AA, reliable. Something you could work with in pretty much every scenario. And honestly, for me, premium ships that are reliable in pretty much every scenario are incredibly exciting. Because that should mean that you, no matter what the opponent, have a solution for that. And I think that's great. I think that's empowering. And I think that's honestly what the Alaska brings to the table. And I can't wait for everyone to have a chance to play with it or see it in battle. It really is a bargain for me to have 1 million free XP on the ship. It's just a real treat to play. I really enjoy it. You can play it very similar. It's sort of a hybrid Des Moines, Iowa, if that makes sense. It's got the Iowa level of extra armor and extra health, and it's a little bit more sluggish, of course. But then, of course, it's got radar, and it has a much smaller profile, a smaller gun caliber. Because of the smaller gun caliber, it is pretty reliable at finding citadels on broadside targets. Regardless of cruiser or battleship, it's very reliable. And that's an American trait that I can get behind, especially on something like this. I just can't speak more highly on the ship, and honestly, it was incredibly confusing for me for the longest time why they didn't release it. There wasn't a good reason. This is not a very different ship from the one I tested like 3 months ago, guys. Just a really weird situation to be in. But, you know, overall, incredibly happy. I love having radar. I love having the chance to equip Admiral William J. Halsey on the ship. That's pretty exciting. He's my Des Moines commander. And, I mean, because this is a cruiser, obviously it's really appealing. Now, one thing that is probably still up for debate. Should I spend my money on the Alaska or the Wichita? Both of them are American heavy cruisers, and both of them have been released within basically a couple weeks span. So I'm going to try and compare the different attributes of either one, and hopefully this will help you decide if you're one of those who has to decide between the Alaska and the Wichita. You can't really go wrong, though, in my opinion. So obviously the Wichita, Tier 8, Premium American Heavy Cruiser. It fits somewhere in between sort of a Baltimore and a light cruiser for the Americans. It has heavy cruiser aspects, obviously the guns, and the tools that you would expect, but it has the light cruiser-esque hull concealment, and because of that you can get a little bit closer, but your radar's a little bit more shallow in response to that. It's okay. It's a super solid premium tier 8. This is a better experience. This one is more unique, obviously, because it's a larger gun caliber. It gives you more, because it's tier 9 versus a tier 8, both in its credit earning potential and XP and commander retraining and all that stuff. It works very well with the established cruisers for the Americans, so using your commanders in the Alaska works just as well. There was a concern, and rightfully so, that maybe it's too much like a battleship, so it needs more battleship-focused skills like, fire prevention or what have you. I haven't really seen a need to go that drastically that way. But it is a concern. One of the nerfs that they did introduce in the 3, 4, 5 months of testing is the fire duration. 60 seconds is the default time for fire on the ship. And that's not really that good. You're going to notice burning for a really long time. You don't have the kind of hit points. Imagine if you were, a Hindenburg and you just allowed a fire to stick for 60 seconds. That would be devastating. So you have to be a little bit more aggressive with your damage control, honestly, on this. A little bit more cheeky. You got to take more advantage of, being around islands or behind. Obviously, the Wichita does not have that weakness at all. Fire is not a vulnerability at all, no more than any other cruiser. But for these battle cruisers, it is. It is a vulnerability that can't be ignored. Both have great AA, speed, all that stuff. Everything else is very similar. You know, the shell arc, the rate of fire is obviously different because their caliber is different, but effectively their damage output is consistently the same. But the Alaska is just a more impressive experience to me. It's more unique, it's a higher tier, and honestly, I feel like I can carry easier because it has more armor than I can rely on. The Alaska is definitely the jack of all trades, whereas the Wichita requires a little bit more finesse. I personally prefer jack of all trades, but finesse can work as well. But regardless, the Alaska is a real treat. Consistent, reliable, fantastic. I've enjoyed every moment in the Alaska, and honestly, I have been so excited for it to be released for all of you to enjoy. And now, finally, it's here. 8.1, 1 million free XP. It is in the American tech tree, and I expect it'll be there for at least a year, if not longer. So you got plenty of time to decide. I hope that this was at least helpful to give you some direction. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.